Hi everyone, welcome to today's lecture. Today our lecture will be on arguing about literature and the reading is for pages 43 to 97. So hopefully you've read those that part of the book. So for chapter 3, we're going to talk about literature and arguing and how to argue about literature, right? Um, but I guess to start, I think it'll be good to understand what literature is, right? And so when there's a word that could mean, one thing, but there's also other meanings, right, to the word. Um, I just go to the dictionary, right, and look at what they mean in the dictionary, and then I kind of go from there, right? So let's start by looking at the meaning, right? The dictionary, a sort of meaning of literature, and I use Oxford English Dictionary. I think that's one of the most reliable dictionaries online, and it's free for if you're a UCR student, right? So as long as you're working with UCR VPN, you'll have access to OED or Oxford English Dictionary, right? So you know, familiarize yourself with that dictionary. So the OED defines literature as familiarity with letters or books, right? Knowledge acquired from reading or studying books, especially the principal classical texts, right? Associated with humane learning, right? Literary culture, learning scholarship. Also, this is a branch of study, right? So um, let's look at a couple of things here. So related to letters or books, so anything that is sort of written, right? Written form of communication is considered literature, right? Um, Literature is something that's acquired from reading or studying, right? So it's about writing, and it also about reading, right? Something that is written is meant to be read, right? That makes it literature, and referring to books written by or books, classical texts, right? So there is a sense that it's a certain. It's not just anything that is written or read, right? But in many ways, it's sort of written in a specific within a specific tradition, right? Um, and then that becomes that's kind of, I guess, that's where the problem starts, right? With literature. Okay. Associated with humane learning, literary culture, right? So literature is something that's written and read, right? But um, following a certain tradition, right? And also one that influences culture, right? So there's a sense that this is sort of like widely read to a point where it sort of it influences, right, the development of a certain culture, right? Um, and also it is a branch of study, right? That's in the English department. That's what we do, right? We look at literature as a way of sort of theorizing and philosophizing and understanding sort of the world, so to speak, right? So literature is often linked to novels, right? Poetry, short stories, novellas, drama, right? Or plays, right? Written by sort of quote unquote great men and women, right? Um, but you can also argue, right, that letters, right, letters that you, or even emails, for the sake of contemporary times, emails, right? That we sort of send to each other, even memes, right? Or anything that is written and meant to be read, right? You could argue that that's literature, right? Um, and that sense of a reader, right, is very important because it gives the form, a kind of like a performative quality, right? And by performative, I mean like, when you're writing something and you mean for that writing to be read, right? Um, you will write that a certain way, right? A certain way that will attract the reader's attention, right? And that performativity, right? It is a way of it means that it's aware of a reader, right? And so it's performing for the reader, right? So there's a specific style that comes with literature, right? Or comes with anything that is meant to be read, right? Because it's self-conscious, right? And and so I think that's a key thing about literature, right? Because anyone can write anything, right? But when there's a sense, right, that this will be read by not just one person but many people, right? Or it will be consumed, it will be purchased, right, by a lot of people. Then that sort of that writing starts to sort of perform in a certain way, right? To that sort of um, attract, right, um, the reader's attention, right? Um, and so yeah, so that sort of performativity, or what I would refer to as style, right? That sort of like that style is the key difference, right, between communication and, let's say, art, right? And right, and so that, yeah, so for the sake of this class, so you can argue that anything, right, is literature. But for the sake of this class, we sort of look at short stories, right, as literature, right, because we're only reading short stories. Um, right. So why do we study, right, literature in college, right, in a college writing course like this, right? And so reading and writing about literature is kind of like research, right? And that's kind of what we do. In the English department is that we use literature as a way of understanding the world, right, and people, and understanding, why we do what we do, right, why we act the way we do. And this is relevant to students because, whatever your field is, you will be required in some form or another, right, to do some form of research, right, where you will read, you will write about something, write a report, analyze something, synthesize something, summarize something, right? Um, and a lot of times you're going to collect all this data and put them together in a certain way that's not just understandable to you, right, but also understandable to the your specific audience, right, to your boss or to whoever you're working for example, right, um, or yeah, so for your customers, for example, and right. So in many ways, right, that is part um, of that sort of research, right? And but on a simpler, more practical sense, right? We try to sort of like make sense of things, at every moment of our lives, right? Every interaction with other people, every sort of every interaction with ourselves, right? We sort of um, we make sense of why people, sort of act this way, or why do we act this way? Why do we sort of react this way, right? So that, in a sense, we're kind of that making sense of the world around us and of ourselves, right? Is you can call that close reading, right? So we're constantly sort of analyzing something, um, and you know and and the way that we analyze it, right? It's not just sort of like what we see in the surface, right? But oftentimes we look at sort of what is going on. Is there more to what's on the surface that I can kind of analyze in order to make sense of what just happened, right? Um, and so yeah, and so I think that's practical, and so in that sense, arguing and reading literature is sort of useful, right? And helpful, right, in whatever sort of pursuit you are trying to achieve. Um, but also, for me, literature, the difference between, I guess, doing like regular research and researching literature is that literature is considered a work of art, right? And so literature is beautiful, right? Um, it's fun to read literature, I think, right? And it's um, yeah, it's and then so I don't know if you can kind of if there's anything better than that, but like you're researching something that's also enjoyable to sort of consume, right? And so that's my sort of that's the reason why I sort of I got drawn into literature for fun, but also into research because even if it's work, right? We're researching something through work. The form that you're looking at is also something that is enjoyable to you or to me or pleasurable to me, right? So in page 47, there's another short story here, a very short story um, called "Girl" by Jamaica Kincaid, right? And I suggest reading the story. It's really short, so it's not going to take a lot of your time. So read the short story, right? Because the following pages will kind of refer to the short story, and so it'll make more sense to you if you've read the story. And this is a very interesting story. It's a short story. It's a short story, but there's so much going on in this short story, right? And so I really recommend reading it on your own. Um, right, and so read that, and and then we're going to talk about issues, right, and how to sort of come up with an issue for your paper, right? I keep talking about issues, but here we have sort of specific forms of issue that will kind of like guide you into forming your argument, right? So the first example of an issue, right? Um, and there's like 8 of these issues of examples of issues, right? Just you only have to choose one, right? And then just go with that. So um, you can consider issues of fact, right? And so these are parts of the story that are left out, right, or are only hinted at in the story. And so, facts, right, and in a short story, um, what gets included in the narrative, right, is important, but also you can think about sort of like the negative of that, right? What gets included is important, and we have to understand that. But then, what was it? What was not included? What was sort of you want to think about what parts of the story were left out by the author, right? And you can make sort of like factual. I mean, sort of factual parts of the story that were left out, right? And you can kind of think about. You can start to sort of make assumptions, right, about why that is. Like, how is sort of leaving that part of the story out making the story itself better, right? And and so you can think about everything rises, right? We the story pretty much just spans an entire day, right? Like one day, and so Flannery O'Connor chose to give us a narrative that spans one day, and then she gives us sort of like small bits of informations from the past, right, to give us a little bit of context, right? But we don't, and so all we see are sort of tensions, sort of like daily tensions between Julian and his mother, right? And so you might want to ask, right, what was left out? So like what was left out was, like there are so many things that's left out, right? Like, is this like a daily sort of thing for them, or how did this, how did their relationship come to this, right? What sort of events in the past, right, uh, led to this day sort of happening, right? So you can start to speculate about what happened in the past, and she gives us some clues, right, and on how to speculate this. Um, and so yeah, and so you can think about what's not there, right? Factual parts that are not there, that are only sort of like hinted at, right? So yeah, so that's issues of fact, right? And then next you have issues of theme, right? So for a theme, think about this as, what is the lesson, quote unquote, right, of that the story is trying to teach, right? What do you think sort of Flannery O'Connor wants us to understand, right, when she's sort of like telling us this story, right? And you can look at the style of the narrative, right, the characters, the setting, right, the historical context, and you can sort of, uh, uh, interpret it as, as Flannery O'Connor sort of like trying to tell us something, right? Um, so yeah, so that's issues of theme, right? Um, and then issues of definition, right? And so remember what I did in the last video is I kind of talked about the meaning of the word converge, right? And I looked at the etymology, the origin of the word, right, of converge, and um, and then after sort of like finding the etymology and the sort of like the dictionary meaning, and then I kind of made assumptions about what something might mean, right? And so that's something that you can also do, right? You want to find like a keyword, right, in the story, and then start to look at the different definitions of that word, right? And then start to look at the different sort of, or where that word sort of came from, right? And then how it sort of evolved, right? And then after you've sort of like mapped sort of what the different meanings are of that word, and then you can sort of like make assumptions as to why that word is important in the story, right? Um, yeah. So that's issues of definition, right? And then issues of symbolism, right? And so you want to look at symbolic moments, symbolic figures, right, in the play, um, the sort of African American characters, right, that went in and out of the bus. What do they symbolize? You can focus your argument on that. The hat, right, that the mother wore, but then also the black lady, right, who went into the bus was also wearing a similar type of hat, right? What does that symbolize? The penny, right, that the mother sort of gave to the black kid. Did that symbolize something, right? The bus itself, right? Why was almost majority of the story, right, was sort of set inside the bus, and how might that be important, right? What does the bus symbolize in that context, right? Um, right. So that could be an issue that you might be interested in. Right, and then issues of pattern, right? um, I talked about this in the other video. The mother, right, portrayed as childish, right? So that's a pattern that sort of repeats throughout the throughout the story, right? And there's a lot of descriptions of the mother, right, that makes her sort of look childish, right? And which is interesting, right? Because the sort of traditional wisdom, right, the Aristotelian um, sort of idea, right, is that um, with age, right, comes wisdom, right? That somehow, and I talked about this, right? Somehow, like the narrative is supposed to be developmental, right? Um, and so through experience, one is supposed to be wiser, right? But then here, the mother is the opposite, right? The older she gets, the more childish she becomes, right? And so, and that's a pattern, right, that repeats. And so, right, what can you make of that, right? And okay, and then issues of evaluation, right? So you can right start to think about the story, right? Uh, is it suggesting something philosophical, ethical, or aesthetic, right? And I would argue that it's doing all those three, right? It's philosophically driven, it's ethically driven, right? And it's aesthetically driven because it's I mean the writing itself, right, is beautiful, um, and so right, so you can pick one of those, right, and sort of um, uh, talk about what it's doing in sort of like a philosophical way or an ethical way or an aesthetic way, right? So you can say something like, everything rises, deconstructs, right, traditional ideas of age and wisdom, right? Or everything rises succeeds as Southern Gothic because, you know, A, B, and C, and then you'll be talking about sort of like the aesthetic part of the story, right? Right. So there's also the issues of historical context, right? And I talked about this before. Um, for everything that rises, right, you can easily set it against the historical context of desegregation, right? In America, right? Or the post World War II moment, right? Or the civil rights movement, right? So you want to sort of like pick one of those historical events, right? And sort of use that as a backdrop for thinking about the story, right? And so you'll sort of like want to argue that, for example, right, um, the generational conflict between Julian and his mother, right, is sort of symbolic of the historical context, right? Um, right, the historical context of the civil rights movement, right, and symbolic of what was like the larger sort of historical context, right? And and yeah, and don't think that these like different types of issues, right, are exclusive to you know, or they're sort of like not interchangeable, right? They are, right? So just because, for example, you pick historical context, right? Um, you could still talk about symbolism, right? And I'm not going to be like, oh, this is you're supposed to be doing historical context, and but then you're talking about symbolism, right? I don't care. These are just sort of like guides, right? To how for you to sort of like start thinking about what you think is important about the story, right? And so the generational conflict, right? They could be like the two characters, right, in their story. They can be symbolic, right? So that's the issue of symbolism, right? But then they're symbolic of the historical context of the civil rights movement, right, in America, and so that puts it into the issue of historical context, right? So that's fine. That's not a big deal. They can kind of like happen at the same time, right? Right, and then there's also the issue of cause and effect, right? In Everything Rises, right? For example, you can take the final scene, right? The black woman sort of punching the mother, right? And then you want to sort of like you take that final scene, right, and then go back, right, and find out um, sort of what sort of like what caused um, this event to happen, right? So you want to sort of like trace it back to sort of like what happened in the story, right? That sort of like led us to this, right? And then you'll want to make assumptions about why that's so what is the story telling us, right? By sort of giving us all of these clues, right, which led to this moment, right? So that's one way to sort of to think about the story, right? Is through cause and effect, right? So so these issues, right? The like I said before, right? These are the questions, right? That that you want to ask in your paper, right? And then that you want to answer, right, in your paper. And and so now that you've sort of put together these questions of issues, right? Then you'll want to make a claim, right? You'll want to sort of like choose a position on how to respond to that question, right? So, for example, you're interested in the historical context of the civil rights movement, right? Then you can position yourself as arguing that the story portrays the limits and blind side of educated, progressive white individuals, right? Like Julian, regarding race relations in America, right? So that will be your position, right? So, um, yeah, and that's relevant up until today, right? Because even until today, right, white people have a lot to learn, right, about race relations in America. Even those who call themselves sort of like progressives, right? There's still sort of like there's a lot of blind sides, right, in the white experience about issues of race, right? Okay, so now we will look at the sample essay, right? Sample essay arguing about literature on page 61, right? And this sample essay is an essay on um, the short story Girl by Jamaica Kincaid, right? And I recommend reading this sample a couple of times, right? To kind of um, to look at what's happening, how they're arguing about literature, right, and also right imitate the structure of this essay. Feel free to imitate it, right. And so for the introduction, right. The introduction, I will be looking for even though you know and I know that you are writing about, for example, Flannery O'Connor's Everything That Rises Must Converge, right? In the introduction, you'll want to include the name of the author and the name of the story, right? So notice here on page 61, right? It starts with, in Jamaica Kincaid's story, Girl, the speaker is evidently a mother trying to teach her daughter how to behave, right? So in the first sentence, um, sort of they mention the name of the author and the name of the story, right? So that's very important. I mean, you don't have to include it in the first sentence, right? It can be anywhere within the introduction, but it has to be in the introduction, right? When we're reading the introduction, assume that your reader, even though you know that I've read the story, assume that the reader does not know, right, that you're writing about um, whatever you're writing about, right? So you'll want to include the name of the author and the title of the story, right? Okay. As you notice also in the introduction, right, the author gives us a little bit of summary, right? So introduction is also a good place to kind of summarize, right, the story. Like I said, you want to assume that the reader has not read the story, so you want to sort of give them a little bit of context, right, about what you're talking about. And when you're summarizing, you don't want to just like summarize for the sake of summarize or just summarize the entire story, right? That's not practical because you don't have space to summarize everything, right? So you want to pick specific moments, right, that is relevant to your argument, right? And so, for example, you want to use race relations, right? Historical context of race relations, that's your issue, right? And so you only want to pick moments in the story where um, where relations is mentioned, right? The fact that you want to mention the fact that the mother came from a slave owning family, right? And then you want to sort of like mention the part in the bus where the mother was very uncomfortable, right? And then you want to mention the part where the mother gives this black kid a penny, and then she got punched by the mother, right? So you want to be strategic in summarizing, right? Summarizing only parts that are relevant to your argument, right? Because you don't have time or space um, to talk about everything, right? And as you can also see here, they quoted right from the story, right? And so feel free to use quotations from the story in the introduction. It's not a requirement, right? But I require that you are quoting throughout the body paragraphs, right? And right, and so right, so in the introduction you don't have to quote, but you can if you want to. Right. And then after the summary, right, you might want to sort of like pose your issues, right? Um, so whatever sort of like issues and questions you've chosen, right, to write about, and then uh, that will be after the summary will be a good part, right, to include those issues, right? So we want to transition to posing your issues, right, and questions, right? And if you notice here, right, they actually included the actual questions, right, from their issues, right? So um, towards the bottom of the page, this ending also feels inconclusive. For the very last words are questions that does not receive an answer. What therefore is Kincaid trying to emphasize with this puzzling finish, right? So yeah, feel free to use actual questions, right, to sort of to pose your issues, right, um, and then after the issue, right, you then want to sort of um, um, include your your thesis, right, or your main claim, right. So if you notice here, the thesis is at the last sentence of the last sentence or last two sentences of the introduction paragraph, right. So that's also how I want you to structure your paper, right. And so let's read that, right. So that's on page 62, top of page 62. A closer look at its language, as well as at other words in the text, suggests that Kincaid is deliberately making us uncertain about whether the mother's stern training will include, um, will indeed help her daughter become strong enough to survive in their society. Right? The mother may believe that she is providing. So this is the last sentence, which is also the thesis. Right? The mother may believe that she is providing sufficient survival skills, but Kincaid encourages readers to suspect that she is actually disempowering her daughter, not letting her develop the willpower she needs to endure. Right. Um, and so that's the thesis, right? They're arguing here that the narrative structure, right, of Girl might suggest sort of one form, right, that the mother may believe that she is providing sufficient survival skills, but actually, right, what is happening is blah, 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 that the mother is actually disempowering, right? Um, and so, right, so that's, um, they're using here, right, the issue of cause and effect, right? So they're saying that um, the narrative cause and effect is this, right? But what I'm saying, but what they're arguing is that the cause and effect is actually this, right? So it, on the surface, it may seem like the mother is only helping and trying to encourage, right, the daughter, but then I'm arguing, the paper is arguing that the cause and effect is actually led to the disempowerment of the daughter, right? So, so that's their argument, right? So I think that's a good one. And just for the sake of style, right? We talk about style. Notice here how on the thesis, the last sentence, right? How they use the how they repeat, right? I talked about this last time. Alliteration, the repetition of consonants, right? And so just to make it like rhythmic, right? Um, and the thesis is a good place to do that. So so the last phrase, Kincaid encourages readers. Notice the repetition of the word or the letter D, right? Readers to suspect that she is actually disempowering her daughter, right? Not letting her develop the willpower she needs to endure, right? So that gives it. That's an example of alliteration, right? That gives the sentence a bit of a rhythm, right? But just repeating one word, disempowering, daughter, develop, endure, right? You don't have to do that, but I'm just saying that that's what they're doing here. All right, so body paragraphs, right? Um, this is where you're going to um, give evidence, right, and examples from the story to support your claim, right? And then you'll make assumptions, you'll make your interpretations throughout the body paragraphs, right? So what I suggest doing first, right, is picking 2 to 4 scenes, right, from the story, um, and right. So pick your scenes, right? Examples of whatever issue, right, that you're trying to address, right? So pick your scenes, and then use that, right? Start with that, right? Um, and then once you have your scenes, and then you'll kind of like use each scene as an example for one paragraph. So one paragraph of the body will have like one scene, and then you'll analyze that scene, and then the second paragraph of the body will have another scene, right? And then you'll analyze that scene, and then the third paragraph will have another scene. Or if you decide to just pick 2 scenes, especially if the scene is very, there's a lot going on in one scene, you can just you can talk about one scene in 2 paragraphs, right? And right. And so on page 62, um, Notice here how the, so this is page 62, the paragraph after the thesis, right? So when the mother commands her daughter to squeeze the bread, probably she sees herself as pushing her to take charge of her life rather than meekly accept other people's treatment of her. Right. To squeeze something is to perform a vigorous self-assertive action. Right. Um, and so this is the opening sentence of your body paragraph should be sort of some kind of like a mini claim, right, related to your larger claim, right? And And then notice the second sentence here. To squeeze something is to perform a vigorous self-assertive action, right? So they're all the author of this essay is already kind of making assumptions, right? Reasonable assumptions, right? To squeeze is this, right? And so this must be what's happening, right? And right, and then after that, right? Um, she then goes to just set up the scene. So she will be talking about a specific scene in this paragraph, right? But then before you actually quote the scene, right, you want to set it up, right? And that means sort of like giving us like one sentence to kind of like describe um, what what's happening in the story that led us to the scene that you're going to talk about, right? Because then again, right, like you want to assume that your reader has not read the story, and so you want to just give us one sentence of sort of setup, right? And so notice here, right? So earlier in the text, the mother offers a few other hints that she wishes the daughter to be aggressive, not passive. Yeah, so that's the setup, right? So earlier in the scene, this happened, blah blah blah, right? So that's a setup to the scene that you're going to talk about, right? And then now she goes on to quote, right? For example, she advises her on quote how to make a good medicine to throw away a child before it even becomes a child, right? End quote, right? So talking about abortion here, um, and right. So that's, yeah. So you can just copy this structure, right? For example, blah blah blah, right? Quote this and that, um, right? So that's usually how you want to sort of like structure, right? The paragraph, right? And then after you've quoted, right, you'll want to sort of analyze the quotation after. Give us one sentence or two sentences to kind of to talk about the quote, right? Right. So and when you're quoting, right, don't just quote or don't just use one quotation, one sentence. That's called a floating quotation, right? Where your entire sentence is just a quotation. Don't do that, right? Make sure when you're taking quotes from the story, you want to incorporate that into your own words, right? So notice here, just a simple act of saying, for example, she advises her on quote blah blah, right? So just use your own words to introduce the quote. Don't just quote straight up in a sentence. Um, okay, so make sure you integrate your own words. Right, and so now I'm on the third paragraph, right? Still on page 62, paragraph 3. I'll just read the paragraph. But in crucial ways, the mother presses her daughter to play a subservient role in society. More specifically, she attempts to imprison her in a model of femininity that allows for men to dominate, right? Emphasizing that, quote, you are not a boy, you know, end quote. She demands that she, quote, try to walk like a lady, end quote, and take care of her father's clothes, right? The various chores that she expects her daughter to perform would make life easier for the male head of the household, right? Um, right, and so that's the interpretation, right? That's her interpretation of the quotes that she included here, right? And so yeah, and so that's what you want to do after you've quoted. You want to, tell us what that quote means to you, or how you interpret that in relation to your claim, right? And then the third paragraph here, right, of the body paragraphs is usually where you include um, sort of, acknowledgement of opposing viewpoints, or um, sort of counter argument, right? Because obviously your interpretation is only one of many interpretations, right? It's not a perfect interpretation, nor does it have to be perfect, right? But you want to acknowledge that, yes, this is my interpretation, but then here's what other people might say, right? And so notice the third paragraph here. That is the third paragraph of the body paragraphs, towards the bottom of page 62. At the end, I admit the mother seems to associate her daughter with an image of power. Right. She implies that the girl should become the kind of woman whom the baker does let near the bread, so that she can test it by squeezing it. Right. And so um, the author here is describing um, right, or talking about counter arguments, right? So that other people might say that the mother is actually empowering um, the daughter, right? Because her argument here is that the mother is actually disempowering, right? She's also acknowledging that this is why other people are saying that the mother is empowering the daughter. But then she then goes on to go back to her main argument that yes, this is what other people are saying, but then here's actually why they are wrong, right? Or why my interpretation is better, right? So that's the um, acknowledgement of counter argument there, right? And then conclusion, right? Um, in the conclusion, you can sort of like form it a different way. Feel free to also copy the format here for your conclusion, right? Yeah, so I think that's it for this lecture video, and feel free to email me if you have any questions. All right.